Absolutely, it's the same system, but given a medieval twist. As people who have played Fog 2 Ancients will know, Fog is designed to give a good representation of ancient and medieval warfare without getting bogged down in so much detail that the game becomes less playable and enjoyable. It's a top-down design rather than the bottom-up design. That means that we look at actual historical outcomes and then try to make the rules reproduce them, rather than working from reconstructions of arrow penetration and the like. Long experience of playing and developing tabletop wargames rules, almost 50 years now, has taught that bottom-up designs paradoxically tend to produce less historical results, because any error in the assumptions can become magnified to the point where the outcomes are less rather than more historical. It's a morale-based rather than the casualty-based system. The goal is to make the enemy run away rather than to kill them all. Historically, most of the casualties were inflicted when a defeated army was pursued. The army lists are based on extensive research by experts over a number of years and are as historically accurate as we can make them. We try to analyse the important differences between different nations' armies and not invent differences between their units just to make them more different, when such differences are not supported by good historical evidence or are based on biased historical propaganda. The mechanics are mostly exactly the same as Fog Ancients. Unit types that have analogues in Ancients will behave the same. However, the new medieval troop types, such as knights, dismounted knights, crossbowmen, longbowmen, new types of spear unit, standard wagons and so forth, will interact differently. Well, firstly, Fog 2 Medieval does not have a completely new engine. It does have some rules changes to suit the medieval period, but otherwise it plays in much the same way as Fog 2 Ancients. The main reason it's a standalone was to allow us to give it a medieval feel, including medieval themed music with user interface and terrain graphics based on medieval manuscript illustrations. We felt that the ancient mosaic look of Fog 2 Ancients was no longer appropriate for the medieval period, and it would be a lost opportunity to shoehorn medieval into a game with an ancients look. The other main reason is that the addition of knights to the game significantly alters the balance between the different troop types, and having the medieval game as standalone allowed us to completely rebalance the unit cost system to reflect this new balance. We also took the opportunity to completely revise various UI displays, e.g. route percent indicators, tool tips, close combat reports, combat log, etc., all of which are greatly enhanced in Fog 2 Medieval. We also added historical balance for each nation, defensive battle and siege relief scenarios, field fortifications in custom and campaign scenarios, frozen, that is snowy terrain style, many more strategic decisions and scenario setups in campaigns, and various improvements to the scenario editor. There are 12 epic battles covering some of the more important engagements in Northern and Central Europe in this period. Hastings 1066 is of course between Normans and Anglo-Saxons. Tinchebray 1106 is between Normans and Anglo-Normans. Trutina 1110 is between Bohemians and Poles. Krugmar 1136 is between Welsh and Anglo-Normans. The Battle of the Standard 1138 is between Scots and Anglo-Normans. Steppes 1213 is between Brabançon and Liégeois factions in the Low Countries. Bouvines 1214 is between the Kingdom of France and the Holy Roman Empire. Otepar 1217 is between the Livonian Sword Brethren and an alliance of Estonians and Pskovian Russians. Kalka River 1223 is between the Mongol invading forces and the Russians. Bornhoved 1227 is between Germans and Danes. Lake Pipus 1242 is between the Teutonic Knights of the Teutonic Order of St. Mary of Jerusalem versus the Alexander Nevsky's Russians. And Crescentbrunn 1260 is between Hungarians and Bohemians. All of these have been developed by Paul Adaway, and I think you'll agree he has done a very fine job of it. I rather like the Lake Pipers scenario, but they're all interesting. I find all of the factions interesting for different reasons. With the traditional feudal armies, the key is combined arms tactics between knights, crossbowmen or archers, and spearmen. Humans and Mongols try to defeat feudal armies by horse archery and evading their charges. Other armies, such as the Baltic tribes, Welsh and Irish, must make optimum use of terrain to stand up to feudal armies. The base game covers northern and central Europe in the period 1040 to 1270 AD. There are 58 different army lists, and these represent 28 nations or factions at different periods, covering France, Normandy and Brittany, Germany, the Low Countries, Free Cantons, England, Scotland, Wales, Ireland, Denmark, Norway and Sweden, the pagan Baltic tribes such as the Old Prussians and Lithuanians, Teutonic Knights, Russia, Poland, Bohemia, Hungary, the Cumans, Volga Bulgars, and the Mongol invasion. The lack of such indicators is a deliberate part of the design philosophy. The information is available by mousing over the map, so scouting out the terrain isn't an onerous task. But not having neon warning signs over dangerous terrain is more realistic and allows players to make the same sort of mistakes that historical generals often did, with troops suddenly finding themselves in unfavourable terrain because their commander failed to scout it out. Because we were going for a tabletop look in Fog 2, with detailed individual figures each representing an average of 60 actual men, it wasn't possible to represent the terrain on the same scale as the figures. Otherwise, trees and buildings would be huge and wouldn't fit on a square. So it was inevitable that there would be a mismatch between the figure and the scenery scales. Even Pike and Shot has such a mismatch. It's just less obvious because the figures are smaller, but the buildings and terrain objects are still smaller relative to the figures than in reality. The terrain in Fog 2 Medieval has been deliberately designed with an unrealistic look, corresponding to medieval artistic conventions of depicting terrain, as seen in medieval manuscript illustrations. All of the banners use historical symbols appropriate to the nation or faction that they represent. Currently, we have no plans to make banners customizable.